I think what we need to do is go back to the previous meeting in Islamabad and look at what actually occurred. The first thing, which I think is very revealing, is that the Iranians showed up with 70 people. They had large numbers of experts in various fields. They were carrying maps, geological surveys. They were loaded for bear, frankly, to discuss in detail what they would accept in terms of conditions and what they would not and what they would negotiate. We showed up with Vice President Vance and Messrs. Witkoff and Kushner, who had previously been judged as unwanted members of the delegation. The Iranians simply said, we regard these people as Israeli assets, and frankly, that's what everybody does see them as. We don't see them as representing American national interests. So they were prepared to talk with Vice President Vance, but not them. Unfortunately, as far as we know, there was otherwise no supporting staff. Now, this is not the first time that this has happened. This happened in Anchorage. The Russians showed up and were prepared for very substantive talks. They brought with them all sorts of material pertaining to Ukraine, current state of affairs, troop locations, recommended solutions, and so forth. We showed up with nothing. And Trump thought that he was going to charm his way into some sort of agreement. As it turned out, he conveyed the impression that we were prepared in the future to do all sorts of things. And it took some time for the Russians to discover that they were being lied to. Now, I think the Iranians know they've been lied to. So what can we expect from this meeting? You have the same people. Are they walking in with anything of substance? Are they prepared to sit there, not for a day or two, but for however long it takes to reach some sort of agreement? I'm very skeptical, and I'm sure that the Iranians are very skeptical. So that's the first part. The second part is, as far as I can tell, and I don't have access to classified information, the Iranians have made it pretty clear that the time for negotiation, as far as they're concerned, is over. They're not interested in talking anymore. Frankly, there was a lot of opposition to signing on for the ceasefire that we wanted. Thanks to Donald Trump and the support from the media that he gets with regard to his public statements, the American people were under the impression that somehow or another we were in the driver's seat. We're not. The strategic initiative firmly rests inside Iranian hands. So at this stage, first of all, I have to see evidence, tangible evidence from the Iranians that they have agreed to show up. Otherwise, my assumption is Vance and the two assets will fly in and meet with themselves. But right now, there's just nothing from the Iranian government that substantiates the willingness to participate in the meeting. Then finally, this point, the Iranians aren't asking for this meeting. And contrary to what Donald Trump says, they don't need a deal. That's a bunch of crap. Donald Trump, I think, is finally beginning to come to terms with reality that he's responsible for sending the world into what is likely going to be, at best, a deep recession and more likely a depression. We're headed to a recession, and the question now is how bad is it going to get? And we can talk more about that in the future during the hour, but I think the American people just have been blindsided, and Trump blindsides everybody over and over and over again with nonsense. So it's very hard for the average American citizen to sort truth from reality. But the reality is there's no evidence the Iranians are going to show up, and there's no evidence that any sort of agreement is going to be reached.
Well, there's not, and I literally I'm continuing to refresh my browser here to see if there's any news. So far, no commentary on any of the official Iranian channels, none of them. But there was, though, an interesting interview this morning on Dropsite News where Professor Ahmadian from the University of Tehran was interviewed by Jeremy Scahill, and he was asking him some questions specifically about where is Iran on their non-negotiable terms? What do they have to have?
I think the Iranians have made it clear they're not willing to let go of their highly enriched uranium. They are willing, though, to dilute it back to 20 and then below that, 20% and below that. But giving it up, that's not an option. We had the spokesperson of the foreign ministry saying that the uranium is like Iran's soil. We will not give it up to the United States or any other party things have changed to no return, to my understanding. The Strait is the key and is the table of negotiations. Everything is being put on that table. You want to get into negotiations, the Iranians say to the United States, stop the war in Lebanon. You want to have free flow of shipments and goods through the Strait, then you have to give Iran the remedies to what you did to the infrastructure and the sanctions, unilateral sanctions you imposed on Iran.
So he's saying we will not give up enrichment. We will not give up the nuclear material. We will ask for sanctions, and we will ask for reparations as well, which are all complete non-negotiable. So if that's where Iran is, and they say with the Strait of Hormuz as their negotiating position, we're not going to budge anywhere. So what does that tell you about these negotiations?
Well, I think Ahmadian was being very straightforward and honest, something that would be refreshing from the White House, but I don't think we're going to get it. Dropside News, by the way, is doing a great job. And I have to commend the work of Jeremy Scahill, because he's very, very clear and unambiguous when he says something. And if he doesn't know or doesn't have the information, he doesn't say anything. Again, I wish we had that from the White House. Dan, I'm afraid that Donald Trump is in an extremely dangerous position. You'll recall just a week or two ago, I said, and I think I said it to several people, Donald Trump is beginning to realize that he faces national humiliation here at home and international humiliation abroad. He's walked into a giant bear trap and he's stuck, and there's no easy way out. One of the things that I think is most important for everybody to understand right now is that Donald Trump has single-handedly reversed the Green Revolution. Now, a lot of Americans today don't understand what that was. But the truth is, in the aftermath of World War II, we developed fertilizers, exceptional fertilizers, ways to grow food that we had not had previously. This Green Revolution allowed hundreds of millions, actually billions of people to live an infinitely better life. And naturally, that also meant they could reproduce. The global South right now is in terrible shape, whether it's Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia. All of these countries now are suffering. One of the reasons they're suffering is because 50% of the world's supply of urea comes from the Middle East, comes through the Persian Gulf. Iran alone is the second largest global supplier. Global urea production is roughly 220 million tons a year. And why is it produced in such large quantities? Well, that's because other than ammonia, urea has the largest and highest nitrogen content of all industrial chemicals. The point is that these fertilizers with nitrogen and phosphate combined with urea are coming from major suppliers like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And sulfur, nearly 50% of the world's sulfur exports pass through the Strait. We talk all the time about oil. Yes, oil is a problem. Roughly 10 million to perhaps 13 million barrels of oil globally are missing. But it's not just oil. It's all of these petroleum products and those things connected with it. I think Donald Trump is taking phone calls now, and if he isn't, then somebody else in his office is, from world leaders telling him, look, whatever you think you were going to accomplish, it hasn't worked. The world is in a lot of trouble. You've got to get out of this, because if you don't, we're going to face famine around the world in many key areas in the global South. We're probably going to go into a depression. That's particularly true in Europe right now. There is unrest all over Europe's major capitals. We've seen it finally in Berlin. We see it in Great Britain. We see it in France and Italy and Spain. The bottom line is this can't go on. And he doesn't want to admit the truth that the Navy has lost control of the global sea routes. It's lost control of the Strait of Hormuz, although it really never had it. And Middle East energy infrastructure is being destroyed. And the Iranians have made it abundantly clear, if you attack us this next time around, try to wipe out our oil infrastructure, try to destroy our desalination plants, we will respond in kind to the west coast of the Persian Gulf. And that would be devastating to the world. In fact, many of those areas may never come back as they once were. I doubt it seriously.
And, Doug, to that point here, I just recalled something Sorry, Gary, I didn't get a chance to give you this morning, but this is Christine Lagarde talking about that exact issue inside of Europe.
Happening in the energy world. So if the disruption persists long enough, the adjustment shifts from prices, which we are putting up with now, to possibly rationing with very different economic consequences. Higher prices are primarily inflationary. Shortages hit output directly and are worse for growth. Overall, there have been so far limited signs of supply chain disruption, both globally and in the euro area. But local tensions are visible. Jet fuel prices have roughly doubled since the outbreak of the conflict, and rationing has been imposed at some individual airports in Europe since early April. And I'm not talking about what's happening in the rest of the world. I'm just back from the IMF and the World Bank spring meetings, like many of you, and you might have bumped into colleagues from Asia, in particular some of the low-income countries or emerging market economies that are taking a much more severe hit than